Hello everyone, welcome back to Android Development Fundamental course. So now that you have seen how we can use the storing data as files and the shared preference for the persistent storage, now it's time to learn about some database. That too also is SQLite database. In this particular session, we're going to learn about what exactly is SQL database, what exactly is a cursor class, what are content values, and how exactly we can implement the SQLite database. So what exactly is SQLite database? Well, SQLite database is a database only, but it's a versatile database for your mobile operating system. It's not being just used by Android operating system. It will be used by other mobile operating systems such as BlackBerry, iOS, or any other mobile operating system you see out there. Because it's a very light database which gives you a structured data to store your data persistently. Accessing, querying, updating, deletion or insertion is pretty easy in this database, and you get the RDBMS database, that is, you get to save in rows and columns here. So when we talk about the components of SQLite database, it contains at the top SQLite Open Helper class, and inside the SQLite Open Helper class, you will be creating your SQLite database. So we will see how exactly we implement this whole structure. So let's just talk about SQLite Open Helper class. SQLite Open Helper class is the class which is responsible for creating and upgrading your database. So this is the class which you need to extend inside your own class to make a database for your application. Under the hood, under this class only, you will be creating your own database classes. This is the class which will be used to execute all your requests and manages all your database. Now let's just talk about cursor class. What is a cursor class? Cursor class is just like the result set in your Java. It saves the data in the form of rows and columns. Whenever you make a query to your database, the result which comes back is in the form of cursor class, is in the data type cursor class. So it provides you a very smooth way to interact with your rows and columns or the data which you have got from your database. You can you have methods here like move to next or move to first, so you can check out whether you got the data, then only move to next, or whether you if you don't got the data, it will return you the null. Think it of as a arrays of rows. It will provide you the rows of your tables. When we talk about cursor, you can create the subclasses of cursor also. There are few subclasses of cursor which you can create, like SQLite cursor. It exposes the database from a query on a SQLite database only. So it's the journal cursor class. It's the journal cursor which we use, which gives you the access of your SQLite database only. Matrix cursor gives you the access of a mutable cursor, which can be changed dynamically. So there are some common operation which you can implement in a cursor, like get count to get the number of rows in a cursor, get column names. It gives you the string array with the column name. Get position will give you the position of the cursor. Move to first, move to next, again is used to iterate through the cursor. Or close will release through all the resources which the cursor was using. So how exactly you process the cursor? Well, you will be of course passing a query, db.raw query. We will talk about what exactly raw query is in a bit. But once this is a database query, so we will talk about it. But once you implement this query, it will return you a cursor object. And once you get the cursor object, you will save it in a any cursor object, and then you will iterate through it with the help of a loop, a while loop, let's suppose, and then you will check out if it can move to next. If there is a data returned back from that query, then it can move to next, and then you can do something with that data. And finally, you need to close your cursor. Now, what are content values? If you want to pass the data to your, or if you want to insert the data inside your database, how would you do that? One way is provide the values, as the variables, maybe string variable, integer variable, whatever the value you are supposed to pass, or you can use the content value class. Now let's just see how exactly we can use the content value. First, you will be creating the object of the content values, and then you will be using the method put. You will be using the key, that would be the column name, and the value corresponding to that column, what you want to save. And similarly, the second column name and the corresponding value, what you want to pass. At the end, from your database object, you will use the insert method. again, we will talk about this insert in a bit. You will use insert, db.insert, and pass the table name, whatever the table you want to update. And then you will pass the values as a third parameter. We'll talk about this, the second parameter also, that is called null column hack, in a bit. Now let's just see how we can implement the SQLite. Now let's just see how exactly we can implement our SQLite database. First, we are going to create our data model class. A data model class will be the class which will provide me the data. It can be any class which with the help of getter or setter, or it can be a simple Java POJO classes, plain Java objects, right? And then you will be subclassing, or you will be creating a class by extending a class named SQLite Open Helper, because this is the class which is responsible for creating your databases. Then inside that you will be providing some constant for the table and database, like database name, table name, or database version, things like that, right? And then you will, because SQLite Open Helper class is an abstract class, you have to implement two abstract methods here. Those are onCreate and onUpgrade. OnCreate is responsible for creating your tables inside your SQLite database, and onUpgrade will be responsible for upgrading your database if you do make any changes. And you can implement all the predefined methods which are already provided by SQLite Open Helper class. For querying, we have query. For insert, we have insert. For delete, we have delete, and update and count too. After you define your SQLite Open Helper class, then you have to get to the activity, your main activity, or in whichsoever activity you want to access your database. You have to create the instance of your SQLite Open Helper class, and from there you call all the methods or all the operations, whatever the operation you want to perform, maybe insert, maybe query, or maybe delete or update. Now let's just discuss about each one of those points in a brief. How can we create our data model class? Well, it will be a simple Java class with the getters and setters, which I can use inside my database to get the database or set the data, to get the data or set the data. Then I will be creating a subclass using SQLite Open Helper class. That's how I will be doing it. I will be creating any class, let's say my own class, extend SQLite Open Helper class, and then in the constructor of it, the very first statement I need to pass is the super. That is I have to call the parent class constructor, that is SQLite Open Helper class constructor. Until and unless you don't do that, it will give you an error, because you have to pass the values to your parent class first. So what are the arguments you need to pass here? First argument is a context object, which you can get from wherever you will be creating the instance of this class in an activity, maybe. Next is your database name. Whatever the database name you have already defined, you must have already given the constant at the top before creating the constructor. So you must have already defined the database name. Third is your cursor factory object. What exactly that is? If you have a subclass of cursor object, then you use that object here. Otherwise, if you want to use the default one, just put it null. And last is the version of the database. If there is any change of version, let's say today in your database there are only 2 columns. Tomorrow you decide to include 1 more column. Then you might want to change the database version name. And once you change the database version name, SQLite would know that, okay, now previous database version was different, the new one is different. So it will automatically call a callback method, which I told you in the starting, onUpgrade. And in onUpgrade, you will provide the code to handle whenever the database gets updated, what you need to do. You might want to alter the table, or you might want to drop the whole complete table and start it again. We'll see that. So this is how you can provide the constant for a table. Like you can provide database version, database name, table name. If you want to provide the constant column name as constant, then you can provide the column names also as constants. After you provide the constants for that, then you have to also provide the query for creating your first table inside the database. So how can we do that? We all know that the query for creating a table is create table. You must have already declared the table name at the top, so you gonna use or concatenate that, and then your IDs or your column names, and then the type, which type you want. whether integer or if you want to make it primary key, and then the other attributes, other columns, and accordingly the type you want to the type you want to declare them, whether text or varchar will also work. And then that query you have to execute inside the callback method on create, which you have to override once you extend a class with the SQLite Open Helper class. So that query you have to execute inside the on create. Either you can execute it directly, you can put the whole query directly inside db.exesql. Exesql is the method which will be used to execute all your DML queries. So this is where you will be, either you can directly put the query here, or you can put the query at the top and then use it as a string variable here. Now let's just talk about on upgrade. Like I told you that if you decide to change the version at the later stages, let's say instead of 2 columns now you have 3 or 4 more columns. Now you have to change the version at the top. As soon as you change the version, automatically on upgrade gets called, and inside this you can put the code. Either you want to alter the table, or you want to drop the whole table which was previously used by the user, and again pass the control back to onCreate, because in onCreate there will be a new table created for you. There are some optional method also which you can take a look at, like on downgrade, on configure, or on open. They are optional, so you don't have to override them, but according to your need you can always override them and use them inside your SQLite Open Helper class. Now let's just talk about database operations. What are database operations? Yeah, you guessed it right. Like querying, getting the, that is fetching the data from the database, inserting the data into the database, or updating any data which is already in the database, or deleting some data from the database. So your SQLite Open Helper class already provides you with all these methods. You just have to know how to use them. Let's just talk about query method first. With the help of query method, you can fetch the data from the database. It totally depends upon you whether you want the whole thing, or you want the data according to the where clause, or a particular row or set of rows. For that, accordingly your query statement will be changed. We're gonna see what are the different query statement you can use. So there are 2 types of query methods you can use. One is your raw query, another one is your query. You will be using raw query when data is totally under your control and supplied by your app only. And for any other queries, you will be using the normal query method. We're gonna take a look at both of them. Let's just talk about the raw query method first. Inside raw query, the first parameter will be the string, and that string is nothing but the query of your SQL. Like if you want to select the whole table, select star from the table name. Now, if you want to select a particular row or set of rows, then your query will change, select star from table where column name equals to this, or where column name is less than this. So accordingly the query will change, and you can directly pass the values, your where clause or where values inside the query by concatenating it, or you can use the second argument as selection argument, where you pass the values as a array. So this is how it will look in your code. You will be providing a query. Let's say first I'm providing select star from the table name, where the order is by the key and in the ascending order, and I'm limiting the position from 1. So I'm passing this whole query inside my database, inside my raw query. And this whole thing will be returning me a cursor object. Now let's just talk about the query method. In query method, you don't even have to remember the SQL query. All the values you will be passing as the parameter. For example, let's say you want to update a particular table, you will be passing the table name. You want to get the particular columns, you will be passing the columns name also. And if you want to select, if you want to put the where queries, where values, then you can pass the selection also and selection arguments. And if you want to group them in group by or order them, all those values you can pass here. So this is how it looks like in the code. You will be again using a database SQLite database object dot query and the table name you want to update, the columns you want to select or you want to see, and which kind of column you want to see, that will be my where clause, and what are the values of those where clause, that is where arguments, and other I'm putting null, but you can always put the order by and having and other parameters also, other parameters values also. Let's just talk about insert, delete, update, and count queries now. First, let's just talk about insert method. Insert method is used to insert the data inside your table. It will be containing 3 arguments. First will be table. Second will be your null column hack. That would be a string, which we will be generally putting null. And the third will be your content values. You know the table name, and the data, what you want to actually put inside your table, will be passed with the help of a class content value, which we already discussed. Here the data will be passed in the form of key and value pairs, and data already know that in which column I have to enter which data. So this is, here is the small example. So inside the word list table, I'm putting some values here, and the values object must be having some values to insert into the respective columns. So this is how I can delete, I can use the delete query to delete any data from my table. So I will put the table name, then where clause, and then pass the argument of that where clause. Pretty simple. So this is how it looks like. If I want to delete anything from word list table, at which ID, which row I want to delete, and pass the argument in the wildcards, and our next argument will be the value of that ID. So if I pass the value as, let's say 3, so the third row will get deleted from my table. Same goes with your update also. In update, there will be a table name and the values you want to update, the new values, and where exactly the where clause will be there, where in which rows you want to update it, and the selection or the values of that where clause. So this is how it will look like in action. You will create a content value object and pass the value or new values in that value object, and then use the update query inside your or invoke the update query from your SQLite database object, and pass the table name, pass the new content values, where exactly you want to update, maybe a ID, and then pass the value of that ID, at which ID you want to update. Always put all your database operation in try and catch block, because there can be exceptions. There can be a SQLite exception or syntax error exception. So to avoid all those exceptions, always try to put whatever the operation of your database you are using, put them in try and catch. And always validate the user inputs and SQL queries. If you are taking any inputs from user, try to validate them at the time of coding itself. So that's how you create your SQLite OpenHappy class. Now your SQLite OpenHappy class is ready. Your database is ready. All you have to do is instantiate that OpenHappy class inside your activity and access your database. How do we do that? So inside your main activity or any other activity, you will be initializing the object of that SQLite OpenHappy class. And if you remember, we passed a context object there. So you will be passing this there because activity contains the context object. Now let's just take a look at high-level architecture of SQLite database. So what goes under the hood? Well, let's say you want to populate the data into a recycler view from your SQLite database. How would you do that? Well, there will be a recycler view, of course. And to update your recycler view, there will be an adapter class. Yeah, that also we know. And inside that adapter, there will be a view holder to initialize each component just for once. We already know that. These are the component of your recycler view. Now what we need to know is that if I'm getting the data from the SQLite database, previously we were getting the dummy data. Now I'm not getting the dummy data, I'm getting the data from my SQLite database. So how can I create it? First, I will be creating my SQLite OpenHappy class. Inside the SQLite OpenHappy class, I will be putting a database. I will be creating that whole structure. There will be on create, there will be on upgrade, insert query will be there, and update, delete. All those queries will be there inside one class. That will be the subclass of SQLite OpenHappy class. And then I will use that subclass inside the adapter. And in return, once the data is fetched, adapter will populate it to the recycler view. Now, always use transaction when you have multiple operations to perform. like you have batch statements to perform, more than one operation to perform, like insertion, deletion, or updation at the same time. You can even nest your queries while you are doing the transaction. So that's how you use the transaction. You first begin the transaction on the database. After that, you can put all the queries, maybe insert, maybe delete, a bunch of queries, put them together, and at the end put db.set transactions successful. Once you do that, all the batch statements, all those queries will run together and make your data consistent. The integrity of the data will remain intact. And after that, and finally, you end the transaction. Now, let's just talk about if you want to get the backup. If you want to get the backup of your application over the cloud, how can you do that? Well, all you gotta do when you are taking the backup of your own application is, in the manifest file, wherever your application tag is, you have to provide a attribute known as allow backup as true. Now, just putting that true will not take the backup. Of course, inside the Java class, inside your package, that is development package, you have to extend, or you have to subclass, or you have to create a subclass which will be extending your backup agent helper class. And there you have to connect to the cloud, and once you connect to the cloud and pass the value which you want to save to the cloud, your backup will be created in the cloud itself. Now, it does sound a little bit complicated, but once you get into it, once you start implementing it, it's pretty easy. To learn more about your SQLite OpenHelper class and cursor classes or content value, please follow the following links. Next, we're going to look at the concept and the practicals in our Git book. And we are also going to see a small demo on SQLite database. Thank you.